And there's like so many adoptees that say this. Stop assuming that we should be grateful and stop assuming that we had a better life just because we were here.
Welcome to LoveLink, your guide to relationships in all forms. We're your hosts, Dr. Simone Humphrey and Dr. Sina Simon. Today, we're talking with Alisha Bennett, a therapist and Korean adoptee, about what it really means to grow up adopted. Alisha shares her journey as a Korean adoptee from a childhood in the Midwest to reuniting with her birth mother as an adult, and how it shaped her understanding of identity, grief, and belonging. It's a really honest, moving conversation about the myths of adoption and what it really means to come home to yourself. I was just thinking about the Instagram post that you sent us yesterday. You sent Simone and I this post from the president of Korea, essentially, apologizing for the kind of inter-country adoption that Korea allowed for years. I mean, up until recently.
Yeah.
And how much suffering had gone on among Korean adoptees because of those policies that didn't really have safeguards in place.
Yes.
And so I wondered, just maybe to start us off, like if you could give us some context about the Korean adoptee experience. I don't think many people know about how many kids were adopted to the United States and other Western countries, and how limited the safeguards were.
Sure. So I can speak to just a general overview of Korean adoption history, contributing factors, all of that. I think that if people want more detailed information, a more thorough overview of the history of Korean adoptions, the PBS documentary is an excellent piece of media that people can watch. Any of the New York Times articles that have come out in the last couple of years, the South Korean Truth and Reconciliation Committee came out with a report verifying all of the fraudulent practices. So there's plenty of information out there if people want to learn more, but I can speak to just the general history. South Korea was actually the first country to start sending children overseas for adoption. So they have the longest duration of exporting their children. And it all started after the Korean War, when many children had been separated from their families. Many children were orphans, their parents had died. And there were a number of mixed race babies. So children who were born to Korean women and American soldiers who, had they stayed in Korea, would face deep stigma, significant racism, rejection, and, just a lifetime of hardships. So, I think adoption seemed like a good idea for these children, rooted, though, in the country's drive for keeping their country pure of fully Korean people rather than mixed race people. So by the 1950s, adoption laws were loosened, making it easier to send these children abroad. In the 60s, things shifted and the country was exporting full Korean children. The South Korean government wanted to rebuild the country. They wanted to strengthen their military. They wanted to dig themselves out of poverty. And so sending children abroad became a way to ease the government's responsibility and burden of children that were born to single women and other just social factors that Korea didn't really want to take responsibility for. So in the 1970s, there was new laws that removed judicial oversight from adoptions, and it made the process faster, easier. And by then, there was nearly 50,000 children had already been sent abroad. In the 1980s, which is the decade that I was relinquished and exported to the United States, the numbers only grew. So there were nearly 70,000 children that were adopted overseas during that decade alone. The year that I was born, I was the 3,095th baby to leave the country. And according to my paperwork, I was born in July of 1984 and came to the States in October. So there were several more months of exportation and thousands of more babies left. The year after that, in 1985, was the most exported babies of any other year in history, when nearly 9,000 babies left the country. There have been numerous reports of falsified paperwork, copy and pasted paperwork, children being stolen, parents being told their baby would die if they didn't put them up for adoption, parents being told that their babies actually did die, and just general coercion of women to relinquish their babies. In my opinion, it was an entire system working to effectively sell children. Doctors, nurses, social workers, maternity wards, private agencies, hospitals, and I mean, everyone was profiting. Korea didn't have to pay for a child welfare system because they were allowing all of their babies to leave the country, and engaging in practices in which babies could be exported quickly really allowed for, the now what we have recorded over 200,000 Korean adoptees across the world.
I actually read somewhere in doing a little research before this interview with you that in 2004, so, obviously later than the 80s, but there were 23,000 children, foreign nationals, not just Korean, but from other countries, adopted by Americans. And last year was like 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this real shift. And that a big reason for that was because countries realize that there just are not real safeguards in place for these kids.
Yeah.
I thought that was just an interesting, wow, 23,000 in 1 year. That's crazy. I can't even imagine what it was in 88.
And when you think about these financial incentives and what they were doing to push families or to pull babies from homes, I mean, some of which I'm sure were orphans, right? But as you mentioned, Alisha, some of which
were
had
stolen
families and maybe were
off the street
and were stolen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so crazy.
Exactly.
It's so crazy.
And mothers coerced and pressured into relinquishing.
Right. Which has a huge impact, obviously, on these families, but then also this awareness with these adoptees in all these different countries over the world who are now becoming more and more aware of these abuses.
Yeah, most international adoptees are adopted into white families.
Yeah.
Right.
Not just in the States, but also across Europe and Australia.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which has a huge
Which has its own consequences.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to the extent that you feel comfortable with, Alisha, can you share with us your adoption story?
Totally. It's all over the internet in multiple different places. So I was relinquished at birth. I was in transit for 3 months. At some point, I was with a foster mother, moving from my place of birth to Seoul. At exactly 3 months old, I left Seoul for the United States. Landed in Detroit, Michigan, received by my white American family and all of their relatives and friends. I grew up in a extremely small town in Michigan. There was a cornfield directly across, I looked out my window and it was a cornfield. There was a cow farm up the street, predominantly white community. The only other children of color were other Korean adoptees.
Wow.
So in this small town of 7,000 people, there were 5 Korean adoptees, which just statistically, the numbers, it amazes me that there were that many of us residing in this small town. I think growing up and even into my 20s, I was I love growing up in a small town. I had a great life. And now I'm that, not now, but I would say since I've done a lot more work on myself, it was awful. You are one Asian person in a like sea of white people. Your entire community is white, your family is white, you go to school, all your classmates are white, every single teacher is white, and you have to figure out how to survive. And this is like, we're talking about the 80s and the early 90s, right? When there's no internet, there's like very little research. We're still living in like a colorblind society of like, we don't see race and you're the same. This like belief I grew up with that like we lived in a post-racial society, but also experiencing on a regular basis, just like blatant racism. And not just like with peers and at school, but like within your own family, where like Asian jokes are made and like your siblings are calling you by Mr. Miyagi because Karate Kid was like very relevant then, in one of the only films that had an Asian main character. So it's this constant, at least for me, it was this like constant learning of trying to figure out how to survive in this space. And like you can't leave. And like, nor do you want to, because you're like, this is, you know, you're adopted. And so you've already been in your mind, right, relinquished by one family. And so like, therefore, this is your family and these are your parents, and like, do what you can to be safe and survive. So that like experience for me was, I'm going to lean in to the teasing and to the racism. And I'm going to not just hate myself, but also anyone else that looks like me. I did not engage with the other Korean adoptees. Like there was one in my grade and there was one 2 years younger than me. And then I can't remember. Oh, and there was another one a grade above me. We were like all within like probably a 3 to 5 like grade range. I would not interact with them. I remember when I was like applying to college, I was like, I want to go to a Big 10 state school. And I was like, I can go to Michigan State or I can go to University of Michigan. And I went to the University of Michigan often because I'm in the middle of changing my language around what I call my parents. And so I'm transitioning into the people who raised me. So like my dad who raised me, the person who raised me, worked on the U of M campus. And so we would go there often. And every time I would go there, I would always see a lot of Asian people. And I was like, well, I am not going to that school because there are way too many Asian people that go there. And like, I'm going to do everything I can to make myself look white. And I'm going to do everything I can to make myself act white. And like, that's just too much exposure. So I went to college, still stayed in predominantly white spaces, predominantly white friends. Like I didn't do any of the like Asian American student like groups or like anything. I stayed in my like safe, narrow space of whiteness. Got through college, applied to grad school in New York City. I knew I needed to like get out of Michigan. I was like, I have to go to the East Coast. Came here, went to grad school, you know, expanded out of my white centered mindset, but still avoided any Korean space. So I started bartending in Chinatown in grad school. And so like made a lot of friends at the bar. They were all Chinese American. And that felt like safe because I was like, see, I have like Asian friends, but like they weren't Korean. I refused to go to K-Town until probably my late 20s. So like there's like all the adoption, loss, grief, and trauma that you're holding. And then your whole life, right, holding this like, I hate my identity. I hate who I am. I hate where I come from. And I'm going to be like them.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So painful. So painful.
And so painful for a kid who doesn't have the awareness. I mean, most children, they just need to survive and they depend on their family. And so all the ways that they turn against themselves, I mean, I think you're speaking to kind of the broader experience of children of color, this internalized racism that develops. But then on top of it, right, this other layer of I was released from my bio parents. And so this is the family that I have to depend on. So I have to I have to turn against myself. And it sounds like you've done so much beautiful work to work through that and shift. And it's been a real journey for you.
A long, yeah, journey. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. What has it been like to get connected to other Korean adoptees? Like, when did that shift for you? You said late 20s, you went to K-Town, and I'm
Yeah.
curious what was the turning point for you?
So in my late 20s is when I met Dave, who's my partner, husband. And he's a chef. He's, like he's always been super into food. He's like always been really on top of the New York food scene. And, he's like an East Coast, like his older sister went to school here. He'd spent a lot of time here. So like different level of knowledge just in the food world. So he loved going to K-Town and like would eat Korean food. And so like when I think back about it, it's funny to me because like we were really good friends for a long time, but like I like always had this like subtle like crush for him. And so like if he was going to go to K-Town, like I was going to go to K-Town. It's like, oh, like this is a way I can spend time with him. And like pretend that I like my culture and food. And so he's actually what got me like into the food. And I would say like that was my entry point in my late 20s. And then I had always wanted to in my adult life and thought about like, I know I need to go back. So in 2013, so I was like still in my late 20s. I had initiated a birth family search through the agency that my parents used. And then I quickly shut that down because they sent me an email and basically they're like, go through this process and like, it can be really emotionally hard. And they give you, all the examples of things that can happen. And I was like, the 2013 version of me was like, there's no fucking way I'm doing this. Like, this is way too overwhelming. So like I sat on all this paperwork for years. And then the election of 2016 happened. And the parents who raised me are and always have been Republican. And, at the time, the Republican candidate was an extremist and they aligned and voted for him, which really, I think for the first time, even though like I knew our political differences, I knew our religious differences, as I had evolved and grown, I was like, it was so, the difference between me and them felt so significantly impactful in a way that like it hadn't. And I don't know what it was about that, but it was like, this is the thing that got me to actually complete all my paperwork and submit my paperwork in November of 2016. By December, the next month, they wrote back to me and said they had found her, my birth mom. The way that Korea does birth family searches is if they find a registered address, they reach out. They will only make 3 attempts. And like after the 3rd attempt, if your birth family does not respond, you can't initiate the search again for another annual year. So they had reached out twice, hadn't heard back. We had already had this trip planned to go to Korea. So like in April 2017 was going to be my first trip returning. And they reached out. They're like, we reached out. She hasn't responded. We reached out. She hasn't responded. Let us know when you want to do the 3rd attempt. So I sat on it for a little while and I was just like, let's just get it over with because like, I want to know going into this trip if like I'm going to meet her or not. 2 weeks before we left, when I had fully just accepted, I'm like, okay, it's not going to happen this trip. I'm going to go. We had the trip plan, like the places we want to go, the things we wanted to do. I had an appointment at the agency in Korea to just go over my file. So 2 weeks before we left, they reached out and I'm at the gym sitting in the lobby waiting for Dave to come out of the locker room. And I'm reading this email and I just start sobbing. It was like uncontrollable. It wasn't even like, when you get like that like little buildup and you're like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna cry. It was just like tears. And Dave walks out of the locker room and he's like, what is going on? Like, I've been gone for 2 minutes. And I look at him and I'm like, she wants to meet me.
Wow.
And so
it makes you want to cry.
I know.
I know.
I'm sorry. I'm like getting teary too. And So yeah, it was like, it felt like this relief and excitement. And it was just like this overwhelming feeling of joy. Like we went out that night and like had dinner and like celebrated and had champagne. And then 2 weeks later, we get to Korea and I had my appointment at the agency and she was coming to meet me. And that's when we met, when I was 32 years old.
Wow.
For the first
And what
time.
was that like?
I think at the time, if you asked me, I would have said, yeah, I was like totally present. In hindsight, I'm like, I think I definitely disassociated for parts of it. It was everything, like, but like in every way. It's like shock. You're like looking at this woman who, and we look so similar, who looks just like me. And like as a kid and like even, you know, like throughout growing up, like I have dreamt about this day.
Yeah.
I have always thought about her. I've always thought about wanting to meet her. So it was like this thing that you've thought about your whole life. And here it is in reality.
So big. Ooh.
Yeah. She touched me a lot. There was like a lot of hand holding. There was a lot of hair petting.
The two, do you speak Korean?
Had,
Were you able to communicate with
no,
her? Yeah. Okay.
no.
Yeah.
Yes, I was, because the agency gives you an interpreter for the day. So we had an interpreter. I think the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that sticks out to me about that day is the agency had given me baby pictures of the day I was born, which I had never seen before. And there was like a number of copies. So when my birth mom came in, I gave her a copy too. And she's sitting there in this room and she goes silent and she's just like looking at this baby picture and she's like stroking the baby picture with her hand. And she's like mumbling in Korean. And the interpreter says, "She never saw your face." Oh, and I think in my mind, I had imagined and created this story that like, of course she saw me at birth. And like, of course she held me. And then you learn in this moment that she never held you and she never touched you and she never saw you. And that was shocking to me. And then I'm like recalibrating everything that I had thought, right, and been told or even imagined, or like the stories that I created myself growing up. Mm-hmm. So that sticks out a lot. I think I was in such a emotional high. Like there was just so much joy and so much excitement that like I finally got to meet this woman. And at the time, I had no expectations. I was like, I'm going to meet her. And what happens after, I don't really care, because all I want to do is see her. And then I feel very fortunate because we got to see her again that trip, which we hadn't planned to. And then I, minus the chunk of the pandemic of the years when no one was doing anything or going anywhere, I had returned again in 2018 and 2019. And the plan was to go back every year. So we keep in touch via text to the degree that you can when you don't speak the same language. And I went back in 23 and then back in 24 and back in 25. And the plan is to continue to go back at least once a year.
Wow. So you really forged a relationship with her.
Yeah, I think to the degree you can. Mm-hmm. And being in reunion, I'm also learning after, because now it's been 8 years. For me, there was so much of this honeymoon phase of excitement and I just want to have this relationship with her and connect with her and talk to her and be with her when I can be with her. And you sort of forget that she's a parent, like she is a mother, she's my mother. And the dynamics between a mother and a child, even at this stage of life, like those are going to surface and those are going to play out. And I've talked to my other friends who are in reunion for like around the same time, like 7-8 years. And we are experiencing this similar level of, this is like the reality of what being in reunion long-term is. And the reality of having a relationship with a woman that you haven't known for decades. in the disappointment that comes with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being from two different cultures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All humans have, right, hold disappointment and feelings about our parents and our upbringing and our childhood, right? Like this is like what we do like as therapists, right? We're just constantly healing people's childhood trauma, and so much of that is family of origin. And when you start a relationship in your 30s with a parent, in the reality of what can happen with that relationship, like it's not going to be rainbows and unicorns and butterflies forever.
Right. And there's so much grief too around the relationship that was lost.
There's so much grief.
Yeah.
And that's something I really come to terms with since becoming a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you talk about that if you feel comfortable about the experience of becoming a mother? And, I was thinking about like, so I have two kids, and watching August, my oldest, at different ages, I get in touch with myself at that age and think
Yes.
about my parents
Totally
parenting me at that age. And
yes.
I was thinking, what comes up for you in your experience as an adoptee and having a child?
Yeah, I would say it was way more jarring than I thought it was going to be. But I remember like meeting with my therapist who had been with me for years. And I remember like before having Coco, she would inquire, do you have concerns? Like, or, like, let's really like plan and think about like what might come up. And I was like, no, it's going to be fine. Like, I'm just so excited to have my own biological child relative. Like, this is the, outside of my mom that I didn't know for 32 years, like this baby's mine. And then postpartum hit strong. And my postpartum showed up in uncontrollable anxiety. And I think connections that I can make to that are like in the first 3 months of my life, I had no control over anything. And I couldn't even tell you the timeline of after I was born and taken from my mother, like where did I go? Who was taking care of me? At what point did I go to my foster mother? How long was I in her care? Like there's just so much ambiguity in those first 3 months for me. And the first 3 months of being a mother were destabilizing. And then as I came out of some of that like extreme postpartum anxiety and was able to be more present and just be with her, there's just so many things that come up. Like you're looking at your baby that you carried. And there was this angry part of me that was like, how can any woman let someone take her baby from her? And I know that's loaded, right? Like I know there were social pressures and societal, like there was just so many factors that play into that. But on a basic emotional level for me, I could not imagine like ever letting anyone take this baby from me. And then you're experiencing every developmental stage, like every little first thing you get with your baby when you're like a first time mother. And then holding and realizing that there is so much grief because I didn't have any of that with her.
Yeah.
And so you're in real time experiencing, I get to do this with my child and my daughter. And it's incredible. Like there's so many things that are incredible about becoming a mother and watching them grow. And every time there's like a new development, there's also this other realization in that moment. And it's like as if it's new every time for me that I didn't get that with her.
Yeah. Both the joy and the grief in all of these milestones and all of these moments. That's a lot to hold.
And then there's like envy that goes along with that. And there's resentment that goes along with that. And like I noticed this more, I think, when she was 3, when she would tantrum because she's 3, and that's what 3-year-olds do. I would have moments of like, your life is so different than mine. And you get to wake up every morning and be with your biological mother and your biological father, and you get to look at people every day that look like you. And why can't you just listen to me? Like,
and appreciate
right?
what you
There's
have.
yes, like, do you know what you have? And like, I know that's not like
So
a
lucky.
logical, right, or rational. Like, she doesn't know, she's 3. But there's a part of me that held that. Like, you didn't experience all this loss. You didn't experience this traumatic childhood. Like, you get me every day and your dad every day. You live in Brooklyn and you live this like lovely life.
Unfortunately, babies don't have perspective.
I know. Or like critical thinking skills or perspective taking.
Yeah. But totally makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Being a mother has been hard.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it also impacted also the way you saw your own mom. I mean, it sounds like you spoke to some of the anger that you had towards her for letting you go or giving you up. Yeah, I'm wondering if you could maybe speak more to that, or if there's other ways that it affected your relationship with her.
I certainly think I felt that anger for the first time towards her in a way that I hadn't really even let myself feel before that. Because when you actually have the experience, and you two are mothers, like, you know what it's like to carry and deliver and take care of and love and all the things that come with motherhood. So there was more anger towards her that I have never expressed to her. And she also distanced herself a little bit. Like, I noticed just in how frequently she was like reaching out to me that felt different. And I think there's a level for her that is, it was really hard to see her daughter have a daughter. So yeah, I think it started to sort of reveal the extra layers that are there that I didn't really acknowledge or think about prior to having my own.
Hi, LoveLink listeners. Our group practice, Modern Mind, is located in New York City with offices in Brooklyn and Manhattan, offering in-person and virtual psychotherapy. We provide individual, couples, and group therapy, as well as ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in conjunction with a psychiatry prescriber. Therapy is a powerful experience that can transform your life and help you live it to its full potential. We're here to help take you where you want to go. To find out more about our practice, visit www.modernmind.co or email info@modernmind.co to be connected with one of our therapists.
I'm curious, just because you work with, as a therapist, you work with a lot of adoptees. And I wonder why adoptees come to therapy. What brings them in? What are the issues that they're struggling with? I mean, you've named your own experiences, which I imagine are quite common. I wonder if you could speak more to that. What brings people in for trauma healing?
That's a good question. I think, I mean, I can speak a little bit about myself. I can speak a little bit just from what I know as a therapist to adoptees. I don't speak for all adoptees. I think the thing that gets you to therapy, right? And I think this applies to all of our clients, right? Like, there's always the thing. Like, there's always the reason I'm going to start therapy, whether that is intolerable anxiety symptoms or panic attacks, or I've been living with depression for X amount of years, suicidality. And I think the underlying themes, those can tend to be the same, of unacknowledged grief that we've held our entire life, the loss and the separation from infancy to young childhood, that all of these like symptoms, right? Or like, is it the relationship that you're in that's bringing you to therapy? Like, the relationships or the symptoms, whatever it is, are all trauma responses from early attachment trauma.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds like what can be so difficult about it is like its absence. Like I know, obviously adoptees can have their experiences with the families who adopted them that can be negative, but there's also like this sort of just an absence, and it's so early, like it's
Yes.
before memory.
Consciousness.
It's like
Sure.
sits in the body. Yeah, conscious
Yeah.
memory, right? Like when people come in having experienced neglect, like that kind of thing, where it's like you can't really pin it down, but something feels really wrong inside.
No, I'm glad you bring up the body, because I think that when I think back to even childhood, I could feel something, like even my first memory, that didn't feel right.
You were aware of that.
Like, I think that was always there for me. There was always something that just inside never felt right. And so that, I think, exists for a lot of adoptees. So like there's the loss and the trauma whether it's infancy or from birth or toddlerhood, because like there are a number of adoptees too who were separated, relinquished, stolen at toddler stages. And then you have families that you're adopted to who also repeat and do the things that our other non-adoptee clients experience, of emotional neglect, physical neglect, abuse, sexual abuse, just the complex trauma that exists in, I think, all of our clients, right, from their childhood and family of origin. And adoptees also have that layered on top of the initial loss and separation.
Yeah, you're working through two separate traumas around abandonment in different ways. And one can often be nonverbal, unconscious. And it's making me think too of just like all the adoptee journeys and how different they can look, and depending also on how defended a person is. I mean, you're someone that took, you said, like 30 years to go to K-Town or even connect with other Koreans.
Yeah.
And you're a therapist and you've done all this work. And I'm thinking about, I have two cousins, both Korean adopted, and they're both from different families. And the way that they've related to their identity, to their heritage, to their relationship with their families are just the polar extreme.
Yes.
One who has really struggled, who's been aware of the struggle, who's wanted to connect with his birth parents, and the other that is totally disowned and detached from that.
Wants nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and not interested.
It's common. That dynamic's common.
The detachment.
With adoptive siblings, non-biologically related.
Oh, really? That maybe that dynamic actually plays into each other.
Like I've heard this from a number of adoptees. Yeah. Where one adoptee is really involved in the community, doing a lot of work, and the other adoptee sibling has no interest. And like,
interesting.
Speaking for myself too, everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah.
In the way you're brought up, in the way you're wired, and the way your system is, I think there's probably some adoptees that may never engage. And there's adoptees that like come into consciousness and come into community, like at later stages of their life. I was at the International Korean Adoptee Conference in 2023, and it was my first significant community event in person. And I was at the time in my late 30s. So I felt like I know I'm coming in later in life. And I remember sitting in a workshop, and one of the adoptees raised their hand and said something to the effect like, I feel like I'm late to the game. And it made me so sad, because I think there's also an element of, why did I wait so long? Why didn't I engage in this earlier? There's like a little bit of like a shame aspect around, there's all these other people who have been engaged in community since they were like 16 or in their early 20s or right out of college. And I'm, lived the last 15, 20 years in my existence, but like have disengaged. And I think we're all just on our own journeys and going to figure it out and find community and come out of consciousness when our systems feel safe enough to do that.
Yeah. And how amazing that a person can do that at all. Some people live their whole lives without ever kind of connecting with themselves on that deeper level. So how beautiful that they were able to do that at all.
And that it exists.
Yeah.
That there's so much access now for community, especially with social media and the internet and just the organizations that exist now, that there's so many opportunities to engage in the community.
Yeah. Have you found a sense of belonging in the Korean adoptee community?
Yes. It was never something I thought I needed. Like, I remember even taking a continuing ed credit course about adoption. And they actually introduced in that workshop one of the organizations in New York City. And I had have it in my notes from 2013 and just never did anything engaged, reached out. I don't even think I searched it ever online. But after I met my mom in 2017, that's when I really started to dive into my own culture, trying to unlearn my internalized racism, trying to engage more in my identity and who I am. And then when Coco was born in 2020, it was I have to learn everything about Korean culture because I want her to know where she comes from and I want her to be proud of her Korean heritage. And in order to do that, I have to teach myself now in my mid-30s, because this was completely left out of my childhood. There was no exposure. And then because I rejected it for so long, I didn't do any self-learning. But then when she was born, I was this is, I need to do this. So I was on my own personal journey of really internalizing my Korean identity and being okay with it and really learning how to love myself in a way that I never had before. And so I was existing in that. And then as I was on this journey, then I started to do some virtual community events. I started following more Korean adoptee people on social media. And that sort of led me into, I'm going to go to the international conference for the first time. And it really, in a way, there's joy, excitement, belonging, and it's really dismantling. It was really dismantling to me of everything that I knew before. And now I found all of these people who we speak the same language and they all look like me. And you don't have to explain anything because there's such a mutual understanding. And listen, there is a constellation in the spectrum of even Korean adoptees and how we think and feel. And obviously all of our experiences are different and we're not a monolith, but there's a level of understanding and belonging that you feel being in community that never existed before.
It sounds so healing.
It's healing. And it's also, you're again, recalibrating your life and realizing that there's this connection that exists that you never knew existed before. And it's almost euphoric in some ways. And then you feel that and experience it and you're I can't ever let this go. This has to be part of my life forever.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful and wonderful and healing. And it is work to adapt and figure out who you are in just this life that you knew before you knew them.
I'm so grateful, and it's such an honor to hear your story. I think, in some ways, I think this interview, we were coming into this thinking we were going to ask all these more objective questions about the adoptee experience, but I think actually sharing your personal story is the most impactful, not only because it gets into kind of the felt sense of what it's like in a specific experience, but I feel like it has a real impact on those who don't know the experience and can understand it more. And also sounds like you've done a lot of inspiring work to help others, whether it's working with them in therapy or sharing your experience and opening doors for maybe some adoptees who haven't quite yet opened the door on this journey yet.
Also, just to have more awareness of the people I have met in my lives who are adoptees. I think in the past, I have been very much like, well, they seem fine. I don't, they probably have some attachment trauma, but they seem to have lived a good life, or, you just like, I can't relate to it. And I really have a much more of a felt sense after talking to you about it.
Also that mainstream, I think, mentality of, oh, these children were saved. They were orphans and they had no home. And then they got this opportunity to live in America. And
how lucky are we?
How lucky. Right.
Yes.
And I think that this really shifts that narrative, and all of these articles coming out and all the history being exposed. That's really helpful in understanding actually what the real experience is and the nuance of it.
I would say that's a huge, if we could make a plug, stop assuming that we're lucky. And there's like so many adoptees that say this. Stop assuming that we should be grateful. And stop assuming that we had a better life just because we were here.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's the prejudice.
Yeah. Makes so much sense.
Of adoptees. Yeah.
There's so much bias. I'm like, listen, like, I get it. Like, those are the stories. That is the narrative. That is what we've all been sold on adoption. And I think there's a lot of us that carry that for a long time. And I think the more there's so many adoptee researchers now and influencers and therapists that share content and knowledge that really are helpful in dismantling these beliefs and these tropes, and to continue to just listen to adoptees.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing all of that. Really.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for making space and being open to learning.